The kitchen granite felt cold under my palms as I watched Celeste adjust her skirt in the hallway mirror. At 37, my wife still had that marketing executive polish that had first caught my eye at a Boston networking event 12 years ago. Tonight, though, something felt different about the way she avoided my gaze. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Another late meeting? I asked, stirring my coffee with deliberate slowness. If these board meetings get any later, they'll be serving breakfast. Celeste's laugh came out forced, brittle. You know how it is, Graham. The pharmaceutical account won't manage itself. She grabbed her Hermes bag, the one I'd bought her last Christmas when my investment banking salary could still afford such gestures. Right, well, don't let them work you too hard. I kept my voice light, but something twisted in my gut. 3 late meetings this week, 4 the week before. She kissed my cheek with lips that tasted like expensive lipstick and lies. Don't wait up. The door clicked shut with the finality of a coffin lid. I stood there in our pristine Beacon Hill townhouse, surrounded by the trappings of success we'd built together. The Sub-Zero refrigerator hummed. The imported Italian tile gleamed under recessed lighting. Everything perfect, everything in its place. Except me. 2 weeks ago, Hartwell and Associates had called me into that glass-walled conference room overlooking Boston Harbor. Restructuring, they'd said, nothing personal. 23 years of 60-hour weeks, of missing dinners and anniversaries, of building other people's wealth, gone in a 15-minute meeting with a severance check and a cardboard box. I'd told Celeste that night, expecting comfort. Instead, she'd gone quiet, her fingers drumming against the marble countertop in that way that meant she was calculating something. The next morning, she'd started working late. My phone buzzed against the granite. A text message. I almost ignored it, but the sender's name made me freeze. Celeste. Graham, I can't do this anymore. I can't date an unemployed loser. You'll probably land on your feet eventually, but I need more than probably. I need security. I need someone with ambition. Sorry. Don't make this harder than it has to be. The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering against the floor. Unemployed loser. The words hit like physical blows. I read the message again, then again, each word burning deeper into my brain. She wasn't at a meeting. She was with someone else, someone employed, someone who could give her the security she needed. My hands shook as I picked up the phone. 23 years of marriage, and she was ending it via text message while sitting in another man's bed. I scrolled up through our recent messages, looking for clues I'd missed. There, 3 days ago, she'd asked about my job search. I'd been honest. A few promising leads, but nothing concrete yet. Her response had been a simple, okay, but now I could read the disappointment between those 2 letters. The house felt enormous around me, every room echoing with memories that now felt like lies. The kitchen where we'd planned our future. The living room where we'd hosted dinner parties for my colleagues. The bedroom where we'd made love just last week, her hands in my hair, whispering that everything would be okay. All of it. A performance. A woman hedging her bets while she found a replacement. I poured myself 3 fingers of the Macallan 25 we'd been saving for a special occasion. Apparently, my wife leaving me via text qualified. The scotch burned, but not as much as the realization that I'd been played. How long had she been planning this? How long had she been shopping for my replacement while kissing me goodbye each morning? My phone buzzed again. Another text, this one from Riley Morrison, my former colleague and one of the few people who'd stayed in touch after my layoff. Hey man, saw Celeste at Morton's downtown. She was with some guy in a Tesla. Looked cozy. You okay? Morton's. Our anniversary restaurant. She was there right now, probably ordering the salmon she always got, probably laughing at his jokes while her phone sat silently on the table next to her champagne flute. I typed back, just got the breakup text. Unemployed loser, apparently. Riley's response came immediately. Jesus, Graham. I'm sorry. Want me to come over? No. I need to think. I walked through the house, seeing it with new eyes. The mortgage was in both our names, but I'd made the down payment with money from my signing bonus at Hartwell. The furniture, the art, the carefully curated life we'd built, I'd paid for most of it. In her home office, Celeste's laptop sat open on the glass desk. She'd been in such a hurry to get to her date that she'd forgotten to close it. The screen was dark, but when I touched the trackpad, it blazed to life. Her email was open. Gmail, not her work account. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. But the subject line of the top email made my decision for me. Tonight's the night. From Sasha Chen, Celeste's best friend and fellow marketing executive. I clicked it open. Girl, you've been planning this for weeks. I'm so proud of you for finally pulling the trigger. Graham's a nice guy, but nice doesn't pay for Hermes bags, am I right? Bryce is going to worship you. Send pics of the ring when he proposes. The ring. My vision blurred at the edges. She wasn't just leaving me. She was already planning her next wedding. I scrolled down to Celeste's response, sent this morning. I sent the text. It's done. Meeting B at Morton's at 8. Wish me luck. P.S. Think I should keep the house? Graham's severance should cover his half of the mortgage for a while. Keep the house. With my severance money. The laptop screen reflected my face, and I barely recognized the man staring back. 3 weeks ago, I'd been Graham Pierce, senior investment advisor, respected member of the Boston Harbor Club, husband to a beautiful woman. Now I was Graham Pierce, unemployed loser, sitting in the dark, reading about how my wife planned to spend my money after she left me for a man named Bryce. Bryce. Even his name sounded like money. I closed the laptop and walked back to the kitchen, finishing the scotch in one burning gulp. The house was silent except for the hum of expensive appliances and the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the one Celeste had insisted we buy because it made a statement. The statement it was making now was that time had run out. But as I stood there in the wreckage of my marriage, something cold and calculating began to form in my chest. Celeste thought she was so clever, so careful in her planning. She thought she could discard me like an outdated portfolio, trade up to a newer model with better returns. She'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'd spent 23 years learning how to play the long game. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my home office with a legal pad, making lists. Assets, debts, mutual friends, Celeste's vulnerabilities, her ambitions, her fears. By sunrise, I had a plan. First, I called my lawyer. David Kim had handled our real estate transactions and wills, but he also specialized in divorce law. His secretary said he could see me at 10. Second, I called the bank. My severance check, $120,000, was sitting in our joint checking account. I moved it to a personal account I'd opened years ago for investment purposes. Celeste would wake up to find her cushion gone. Third, I called Riley. Graham, it's 7 in the morning. I need a favor. You still have contacts at Whitmore and Associates? Riley was quiet for a moment. Whitmore was Hartwell's biggest competitor, the kind of place that would hire someone with my experience in a heartbeat if they knew I was available. Yeah, I know some people there. Why? Because I'm about to make Celeste's life very complicated and I need to be employed when I do it. Jesus, Graham, what are you planning? Nothing illegal, nothing violent, just educational. By 9 a.m., I had an interview scheduled for the following Monday. By 10, I was sitting in David Kim's office, explaining the situation. She left you via text message? David's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. While she was on a date with another man? Gets better. She's planning to keep the house and use my severance to pay the mortgage. David made notes on his yellow pad. Massachusetts is no fault, but adultery can still impact asset division, especially if she was using marital resources to fund the affair. Do you have proof? I showed him the screenshots I'd taken of Celeste's emails. David's expression grew darker as he read. This is good. Very good. She's been planning this for weeks, using your joint accounts for what appear to be dates with this Bryce person. 3 dinners at Morton's in the past month, all charged to your Amex. I want her to get nothing. That's not realistic, Graham, but we can make sure she doesn't get everything. David leaned back in his chair. The house is the big asset. If you can prove she was planning to defraud you out of your equity, what do I need? More evidence, documentation of the affair, proof that she was deliberately hiding assets or planning to misuse marital funds. David studied me carefully. But be careful how you get it. Nothing illegal. I left David's office with a retainer agreement and a clear mission. I needed more evidence, and I knew exactly where to find it. Celeste worked at Morrison & Associates, a boutique marketing firm in the financial district. She'd be there until at least 6, giving me time to do some research. I drove to the Boston Harbor Club, our old haunt from better days. The membership was in my name, paid from my accounts, but Celeste had always been the social butterfly. If she was having an affair with someone in her professional circle, someone would know about it. The lunch crowd was the usual mix of finance guys and their wives. I found a table near the bar and ordered a sandwich I didn't want. Graham Pierce, haven't seen you in weeks. I turned to find Jennifer Walsh, wife of a Fidelity executive and Celeste's tennis partner. Jennifer was the kind of woman who collected gossip like other people collected stamps. Jennifer, good to see you. She slid into the chair across from me without being invited. How's the job search going? Celeste mentioned you were between opportunities. It's going well. Actually, I'm curious. Have you seen Celeste lately? She's been working such long hours. Jennifer's eyes lit up with the predatory gleam of someone who had information to share. Oh, honey, you don't know, do you? My stomach clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. Know what? About her and Bryce Dalton. They've been practically inseparable for weeks. I saw them at the Ritz last Tuesday, very cozy, very intimate. Bryce Dalton. Now I had a full name. Bryce Dalton, I repeated, as if trying to place him. He's a VP at Morrison & Associates, drives that ridiculous Tesla with the custom plates. Bryce 1 or something equally tacky. Jennifer leaned forward conspiratorially. Word is he's being groomed for partner. Very ambitious. Very single. Well, not single anymore, apparently. Jennifer's face fell as she realized what she'd just done. Oh, Graham, I'm so sorry. I thought you knew. I thought maybe you had some kind of arrangement. No arrangement, Jennifer, but thank you for telling me. I left the club with Bryce Dalton's full name and employment information. A quick LinkedIn search on my phone gave me the rest. Harvard MBA, 5 years at Morrison & Associates, specialized in pharmaceutical marketing. His profile picture showed a man in his mid-30s with perfect teeth and the kind of aggressive handsomeness that came from expensive grooming and regular personal training. He looked exactly like the kind of man Celeste would choose as my replacement. That evening, I parked across the street from Morrison & Associates and waited. At 6:15, Celeste emerged from the building, but she wasn't alone. Bryce Dalton looked exactly like his LinkedIn photo, all sharp suit and confident stride. He had his hand on the small of Celeste's back as he guided her toward a midnight blue Tesla Model S. Custom plates, Bryce 1. I followed them to a wine bar in the North End, keeping my distance. Through the window, I watched them share a bottle of champagne and feed each other appetizers like teenagers. Celeste threw back her head and laughed at something he said, her hand resting on his thigh. I took pictures with my phone, lots of pictures. When they left the wine bar, I followed them to Bryce's apartment building, a glass tower in the Seaport district that screamed new money. I watched the Tesla disappear into the underground garage and made note of the address. My phone buzzed with a text from Celeste. Staying at Sasha's tonight. Don't wait up. Sasha lived in Cambridge. Bryce lived downtown. Another lie to add to the collection. I drove home to our empty house and opened a bottle of wine. Not the good stuff, just a decent Cabernet that wouldn't be missed. Then I sat down at my computer and got to work. Bryce Dalton had social media accounts, and he wasn't particularly careful about his privacy settings. His Instagram showed a life of expensive restaurants, weekend trips to the Cape, and gym selfies that suggested he spent more on personal training than most people made in a month. But it was his Facebook that gave me what I needed. Photos from office parties at Morrison & Associates, including several featuring Celeste. The timestamps went back 6 weeks, well before my layoff, well before Celeste had started working late. I screenshotted everything and emailed it to David Kim with a note. More evidence of premeditation. Then I poured another glass of wine and started planning phase 2. Celeste thought she held all the cards. She had a job, a boyfriend with prospects, and a plan to keep the house I'd paid for. What she didn't have was information. She didn't know I'd moved the severance money. She didn't know I had a job interview lined up. She didn't know I'd documented her affair or that I was building a case that would leave her with a lot less than she expected. Most importantly, she didn't know that 23 years in investment banking had taught me the most important lesson of all. The best revenge is a profit. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical Boston fall weather that matched my mood perfectly. I stood in front of my closet, selecting my armor. The charcoal Armani suit Celeste had bought me for my 40th birthday, the Hermes tie she'd given me last Christmas, the Rolex that had been my reward for landing the Morrison Pharmaceuticals account 3 years ago. Everything she'd helped me choose, now weaponized against her. The Whitmore and Associates building rose 43 stories above the financial district, its glass facade reflecting the churning harbor. I'd walked past it thousands of times during my career, always as competition. Today, it might become home. Riley met me in the lobby at exactly 9 a.m., looking uncomfortable in his navy suit. You sure about this, Graham? Marcus Webb is a shark. He'll ask hard questions about why you left Hartwell. I didn't leave Hartwell. Hartwell left me. I straightened my tie and checked my reflection in the polished elevator doors. Besides, sharks recognize other sharks. The elevator climbed silently to the 38th floor. Whitmore's offices were everything Hartwell had been: mahogany and marble, oil paintings and Persian rugs, the kind of old money atmosphere that made clients feel their investments were in safe hands. Marcus Webb was waiting in the conference room, a man in his 50s with silver hair and the predatory smile of someone who'd built his fortune by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else. He stood when I entered, extending a hand that gripped mine with calculated firmness. Graham Pierce, I've heard excellent things about your work. Thank you for seeing me on short notice. Please, sit. Coffee? Water? I accepted coffee and settled into the leather chair across from him. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston Harbor stretched toward the horizon, dotted with white sails that looked like scattered paper from this height. So, Marcus said, opening a folder that contained my resume and what looked like several pages of notes. 23 years at Hartwell & Associates. Impressive client list, consistent performance. Then suddenly you're available. He looked up with pale blue eyes that missed nothing. What happened? Restructuring. They eliminated my position along with several others. Bullshit. The word hung in the air between us like a challenge. I met his gaze without flinching. Excuse me? Companies don't eliminate their top performers during restructuring, Graham. They eliminate extra weight, so either you weren't performing or there's something else. Which is it? This was the moment I'd been preparing for. The truth, or at least a version of it that served my purposes. My wife is having an affair with a colleague at her firm. She's been feeding him information about my clients, my strategies, my vulnerabilities. When Hartwell's pharmaceutical clients started moving their business elsewhere, they traced the leak back to pillow talk. I kept my voice steady, professional. Rather than create a scandal, they offered me a generous severance and a clean exit. Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. Can you prove that? I slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of Bryce's social media posts, including photos from Morrison and Associates client events, where he was clearly networking with pharmaceutical executives, some of whom had been my clients at Hartwell. Bryce Dalton, VP at Morrison and Associates. He's been dating my wife for at least 6 weeks, possibly longer. Morrison just landed 3 new pharmaceutical accounts, all of which were previously with Hartwell. I leaned back in my chair. Coincidence is possible. Probability is low. Marcus studied the documents, his expression unreadable. This is quite an accusation. It's quite a situation. And your wife, does she know you know? My wife thinks I'm an unemployed loser who's going to quietly disappear while she keeps the house and moves on with her life. I smiled, and it felt like breaking glass. She's about to learn otherwise. Marcus closed the folder and leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. What makes you think you can be effective here while dealing with personal drama? Because personal drama is about to become professional opportunity. Morrison and Associates is about to lose their golden boy, and their new pharmaceutical clients are going to need somewhere to go. I met his gaze steadily. I know those clients, Marcus. I know their needs, their fears, their decision-making processes. I can bring them here. Even after what happened at Hartwell? Especially after what happened at Hartwell. When the truth comes out about how Morrison acquired those accounts, those clients are going to want distance. They're going to want someone they trust, someone who was wronged, someone who represents integrity. I paused. They're going to want me. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled in front of his face. Outside, a seagull wheeled past the windows, its cry muffled by the glass. What kind of salary are you looking for? 200,000 base plus commission structure. That's 20% more than you were making at Hartwell. I'm worth 20% more than I was at Hartwell. I have inside knowledge of Morrison's strategies, their client list, their vulnerabilities. Plus, I'm motivated. Marcus laughed, a sound like breaking ice. Motivated, that's one way to put it. He stood and walked to the windows, hands clasped behind his back. You know what I like about you, Graham? What's that? You're not pretending this is just business. Most people would sit there and feed me some line about wanting new challenges or better opportunities. You're telling me straight up that you want revenge, and you think I can help you get it. Can you? Marcus turned back to me, and his smile was sharp enough to cut glass. When can you start? We shook hands over terms that were better than I'd dared hope for. 200,000 base salary, aggressive commission structure, full benefits, and a signing bonus that would more than replace the severance money I'd moved out of the joint account. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: power. For the first time since that devastating text message, I was the one making moves instead of reacting to them. I called David Kim from the sidewalk outside Whitmore. I got the job. 200,000 plus commissions. Congratulations. That changes our negotiating position considerably. How so? Your wife left you because you were unemployed. Now you're not. If she tries to come back, we can argue that her abandonment was premature and financially motivated. If she doesn't, we can demonstrate that you're capable of supporting yourself and don't need spousal support. David paused. Either way, she gets less. Good. What's next? We file papers. But first, I'd like more evidence of asset dissipation. The dinners, the gifts, anything she bought for him with marital funds. I'll get it. I hung up and walked toward the parking garage, my mind already working through the possibilities. Celeste thought she was so careful, so clever. but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. 23 years in finance had taught me that information was power, and power was profit. I had information now. Soon, I'd have both. That evening, I sat in my home office and composed an email to Celeste's mother, Linda Warner. Linda was old Boston money, the kind of woman who valued reputation above all else and had never quite thought I was good enough for her daughter. Dear Linda, I hope this finds you well. I wanted to let you know that Celeste and I are going through some difficulties. She's asked for space to figure things out, so I'm giving her that space. I know how much family means to her, and I hope that whatever happens, we can all handle this with dignity and discretion. I thought you should know that she's been spending time with a colleague, Bryce Dalton. I'm sure it's just friendship during a difficult time, but I wanted you to be aware in case it comes up in conversation. Please give my best to Robert. Graham. I sent the email and leaned back in my chair, smiling for the first time in days. Linda Warner would lose her mind when she realized her daughter was having an affair. More importantly, she'd make Celeste's life miserable with questions, guilt, and demands for explanations. The game was beginning, and I was finally playing offense. The call came at 11 p.m. on Wednesday, 3 days after I'd started at Whitmore. I was in my office, reviewing client files and planning my strategy for reclaiming the pharmaceutical accounts Morrison had stolen, when my phone erupted with Celeste's ringtone. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello, Celeste. What the hell did you tell my mother? Her voice was shaking with rage. She's been calling me nonstop, demanding to know about Bryce, asking if I've lost my mind, threatening to cut me off if I don't come to my senses immediately. I told her the truth, that we're having difficulties and you're spending time with a colleague. You told her I was having an affair. I told her you were spending time with Bryce Dalton. She drew her own conclusions. I kept my voice calm, reasonable. Interesting that her first assumption was affair, though. Makes you wonder what she knows about your character that I missed. The silence stretched between us, filled with her ragged breathing. I want to talk, she said finally. We're talking now. In person. Tonight. I glanced at the clock on my computer screen. It's 11 p.m., Celeste. I have work in the morning. Work? Her voice cracked with surprise. You got a job? I got a job. A good job. Better than the one I lost, actually. Another silence, longer this time. Where? Whitmore and Associates. Jesus, Graham. Whitmore? They're our biggest competitor. Your boyfriend's biggest competitor. I don't work at Morrison and Associates. He's not my... She stopped herself, but it was too late. Not your what, Celeste? Not your boyfriend? Not your meal ticket? Not your exit strategy? I'm coming over. No, you're not. This is my house now. You made that clear when you moved out via text message. It's my house too. Actually, it's not. Check the deed. Check the mortgage. Check who's been making the payments for the past 12 years. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. You'll find my name on all of it. That's not... We bought it together. You picked it out. I paid for it. There's a difference. I could hear her crying now, soft hiccups that might have moved me a week ago. Now they just sounded like manipulation. Graham, please, can we just talk? I made a mistake. You made several mistakes. The biggest one was underestimating me. I never underestimated you. Really? Then why did you think I'd just disappear quietly while you kept the house and moved on with your life? Why did you think I wouldn't find out about Bryce? Why did you think I'd let you get away with it? The crying stopped. When she spoke again, her voice was harder. What do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to realize that 23 years of marriage meant something to me, even if it didn't mean anything to you. And I want you to know that I'm not the same man you left 3 weeks ago. You can't just cut me out of everything, Graham. I have rights. You have whatever rights my lawyer says you have. and you might be surprised how few those are when you abandon your marriage for another man. I hung up before she could respond and immediately called David Kim's emergency number. She's going to escalate, I told him. She just realized I'm not going to roll over. Good. Let her escalate. Angry people make mistakes, and we need her to make mistakes. Thursday morning brought the first mistake. I arrived at Whitmore to find Celeste waiting in the lobby, dressed in her best power suit and wearing the diamond earrings I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary. "We need to talk," she said, standing up as I approached the elevator. "No, we don't." I pressed the call button and watched the numbers descend. "We need to communicate through lawyers. Graham, please, don't make this harder than it has to be." The elevator doors opened, revealing Marcus Webb and 2 other Whitmore executives. Marcus's eyes flicked between Celeste and me, taking in the situation with predatory interest. "Good morning, Graham. Everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Marcus. My wife was just leaving." Celeste's cheeks flushed red. "I'm not leaving until we talk." "Ma'am?" Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd built his fortune by intimidating people. "This is private property. If you're not here on business, I'll have to ask security to escort you out." "I'm here on business. My business with my husband. Your estranged husband, who has made it clear he doesn't want to speak with you." Marcus stepped out of the elevator, and the other executives followed. "Security will be here in 60 seconds. I suggest you leave voluntarily." Celeste looked between Marcus and me, her face cycling through anger, humiliation, and something that might have been fear. "This isn't over, Graham." "Yes, it is." She left, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. I watched her go, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. "Interesting morning," Marcus said as we rode up to the 38th floor. "It's about to get more interesting." I spent the morning making calls to my former clients, the ones who'd moved their business to Morrison & Associates. The conversations were carefully professional, but the subtext was clear. I was available again, and I had information they might find valuable. By lunch, I had 3 meetings scheduled for the following week. That afternoon, Riley called with intelligence from his network. "Morrison's in chaos," he said. "Word is getting around about Bryce and your wife, and it's not playing well with the partners. Apparently, several clients have been asking questions about how Morrison landed those pharmaceutical accounts so quickly." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest someone's been talking to the SEC about insider trading." I leaned back in my chair, processing this. Someone filed a complaint? Someone who knows the pharmaceutical industry very well. Someone who might have inside knowledge of how those accounts were really acquired. Riley paused. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" I might have mentioned to a few former clients that they should look into Morrison's sudden expertise in their industry, purely out of concern for their interests, of course. "Of course. Well, your concern is about to pay dividends. Bryce is apparently being questioned by the partners about his relationship with outside sources of information. Meaning Celeste. Meaning Celeste." I hung up and allowed myself a moment of pure satisfaction. Celeste had thought she was so clever, feeding Bryce information about my clients, helping him steal accounts that had taken me years to develop. She'd never considered that her pillow talk might constitute securities fraud. That evening, I was working late when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "This is Bryce Dalton. I think we need to talk." "I don't think we do." "Look, Pierce, I know you're angry, but this has gone far enough. Celeste is a wreck, my job is in jeopardy, and you're destroying people's lives over a personal dispute." "I'm not destroying anything, Bryce. I'm just letting the truth come to light." "The truth?" "The truth is that your marriage was over long before I came along. Celeste was miserable, you were never around, and when you lost your job, she realized she deserved better." The words hit like physical blows, but I kept my voice steady. She deserved better than the man who paid for her lifestyle, her clothes, her car, and her house. She deserved better than the man who worked 60-hour weeks to give her everything she wanted. She deserved someone who actually wanted to be with her instead of just going through the motions. Is that what she told you? That I was just going through the motions? She told me a lot of things. About how you took her for granted, how you never talked to her anymore, how you treated her like a trophy wife instead of a partner. Each word was carefully chosen to wound, and they found their marks. But underneath the pain was something colder, harder. Did she also tell you about the insider information she was feeding you? About how she helped you steal my clients? About how the two of you committed securities fraud to advance your career? The silence stretched long enough that I thought he might have hung up. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Just like you don't know why the SEC is suddenly interested in Morrison & Associates pharmaceutical accounts. Just like you don't know why your partners are asking questions about your relationship with outside information sources. You snake, you reported us. I reported suspicious trading activity. The SEC drew their own conclusions. I paused, letting that sink in. Just like Celeste's mother drew her own conclusions when I mentioned you were spending time together. You're going to destroy her career over this. I'm not going to destroy anything, Bryce. But if her career gets destroyed in the process of uncovering the truth about how you acquired those accounts, well, actions have consequences. I hung up and sat back in my chair, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Celeste was probably crying into a glass of wine, realizing that her perfect plan was falling apart. Somewhere else, Bryce was probably updating his resume and calling lawyers, and here I was, in my office at Whitmore and Associates, planning the next phase of a campaign that would leave them both with nothing but regrets and legal bills. The game was no longer just beginning, it was reaching its climax, and I was winning. Friday morning brought news that exceeded even my most optimistic projections. Marcus Webb knocked on my office door at 8 a.m., holding a cup of coffee and wearing the satisfied smile of a predator who'd just cornered his prey. Interesting development, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. Morrison & Associates just lost the Pemberton pharmaceutical account. Pemberton had been one of my biggest clients at Hartwell, worth nearly $2 million in annual fees. When they'd moved to Morrison, it had been the final nail in my career coffin. Really? What happened? Apparently they received some disturbing information about how Morrison acquired their proprietary market research data. Something about pillow talk and securities violations. Marcus's smile widened. They've asked us to submit a proposal for their account management. That's excellent news. It gets better. 2 other pharmaceutical companies have reached out this morning with similar concerns. Word travels fast in that industry, and nobody wants to be associated with a firm that's under SEC investigation. I kept my expression professionally neutral, but inside, I was celebrating. The dominoes were falling faster than I'd dared hope. What about Morrison's response? Damage control mode. They've suspended Bryce Dalton pending the outcome of the investigation, and they're desperately trying to convince their remaining clients that this is all a misunderstanding. And Celeste? Marcus's smile turned predatory. Celeste Warner is no longer employed by Morrison & Associates. Apparently, her relationship with Dalton created an unacceptable conflict of interest. The coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. Coffee spread across the expensive rug. She's been fired? As of yesterday afternoon, along with a strongly worded letter about professional conduct and fiduciary responsibility. Marcus leaned forward. Your wife just learned a very expensive lesson about mixing business with pleasure. I stared at the coffee stains spreading across the rug, trying to process what this meant. Celeste wasn't just unemployed. She was unemployable. No marketing firm in Boston would touch her after this. Her career, built over 15 years of networking and relationship building, was over. Graham, you all right? I looked up to find Marcus studying me with concern. I'm fine, just surprised at how quickly things are moving. Justice moves slowly, but when it moves, it's thorough. Marcus stood up. I'll have someone clean up this coffee. You focus on preparing for the Pemberton meeting. They want to see you Monday morning. After Marcus left, I sat alone in my office, staring out at Boston Harbor. A part of me, a small, guilty part, felt sorry for Celeste. She'd made terrible choices, but losing her career seemed like a harsh punishment for adultery. Then I remembered the text message. I can't date an unemployed loser. The sympathy evaporated. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Please call me. It's Celeste. They took my work phone. I deleted the message without responding. 10 minutes later, another text. Graham, please. I need to talk to you. Everything is falling apart. Delete. Then another. I know you're angry, but this has gone too far. I lost my job. Bryce won't return my calls. My mother won't speak to me. Please, delete. The messages kept coming throughout the morning, each one more desperate than the last. By lunch, she'd sent 17 texts, each one painting a picture of a woman watching her carefully constructed life collapse in real time. I felt nothing. At 2 p.m., Riley called with more intelligence. Bryce Dalton just hired criminal defense attorney Patricia Voss. Word is, the SEC investigation is expanding beyond securities violations into potential fraud charges. Criminal charges? Apparently, using insider information to steal clients isn't just unethical. It's wire fraud if you can prove intent to defraud. And with your wife feeding him detailed client information. Riley paused. Let's just say Bryce might be looking at more than just unemployment. I hung up and immediately called David Kim. Have you heard about the SEC investigation? I've heard rumors. Why? Because if Celeste is implicated in securities fraud, it changes our divorce strategy significantly. David was quiet for a moment. How so? A wife who commits crimes using information obtained through the marriage forfeits her right to marital assets. It's called the unclean hands doctrine. Graham, are you saying your wife could lose everything? I looked out at the harbor, watching a sailboat navigate between the islands. The wind had picked up, and the boat was struggling against the current, its white sails straining against forces beyond its control. I'm saying she already has. That evening, I drove to the house, my house, to collect some files I'd left in the home office. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw a familiar figure sitting on the front steps. Celeste looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her makeup smeared, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd had on when she'd ambushed me at Whitmore 2 days ago. She looked up as I got out of the car, and her eyes were red from crying. You changed the locks, she said. It's my house. It's our house, Graham. We bought it together. You left it via text message while you were with another man. I walked past her to the front door. You don't get to come back when your other options fall through. Other options? She laughed, but it came out as a sob. What other options? I lost my job, Graham. Bryce won't talk to me. My mother thinks I'm a disgrace. I have nothing. I turned to look at her. This woman I'd loved for 23 years, now reduced to begging on my doorstep. You have exactly what you chose when you sent that text message. I made a mistake. You made a series of calculated decisions. You chose Bryce over me. You chose his career prospects over our marriage. You chose to betray my client's confidential information to advance your boyfriend's career. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Those weren't mistakes, Celeste. They were choices. She followed me into the foyer, her heels clicking on the marble I'd paid for. I never meant for any of this to happen. You meant for all of it to happen. You just didn't mean to get caught. I walked into my office and began gathering the files I needed. Celeste stood in the doorway, watching me with desperate eyes. What do you want me to do, Graham? Beg? Fine, I'm begging. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I made terrible choices and I hurt you, and I destroyed everything we built together. But please, don't let them destroy me completely. They're not destroying you, Celeste. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. You reported us to the SEC. I reported suspicious trading activity involving my former clients. The SEC reached their own conclusions. Don't play word games with me. You knew exactly what would happen when you made that call. I looked up from the files, meeting her eyes for the first time since she'd walked into the house. Yes, I did. The admission hung in the air between us like a blade. Celeste's face went white. You planned this. All of it. The job at Whitmore, the SEC complaint, even telling my mother about Bryce. You planned my destruction. I planned to survive what you did to me. Your destruction was just a side effect. She sank into the chair across from my desk, her face in her hands. I loved you, Graham. I know you don't believe that now, but I did love you. You loved what I could provide. The house, the lifestyle, the security. When I couldn't provide those things anymore, you went shopping for someone who could. That's not true, isn't it? When did you start sleeping with Bryce, Celeste? Before or after my layoff? The silence was answer enough. Before, she whispered. But it didn't mean anything then. It was just physical. I didn't decide to leave you until after you lost your job. So you were cheating on me while I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for your lifestyle, and you only decided to leave me when I couldn't pay for it anymore. I closed the file folder and stood up. Thank you for clarifying that. It'll be helpful in the divorce proceedings. Divorce proceedings? Did you think we were going to work this out over couples therapy? You left me, Celeste, via text message, while you were with another man, in a restaurant I paid for, wearing jewelry I bought you, planning a future with my money. I walked toward the door, but she grabbed my arm. Graham, please, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking for mercy. Don't let them send me to prison. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. For a moment, I saw the woman I'd married, the one who'd laughed at my jokes and held my hand through my father's funeral and cried with joy when we'd bought this house. Then, I remembered the text message, and the moment passed. You should have thought about prison before you committed fraud. I pulled free of her grip and walked out of the house, leaving her alone in the office where she'd planned my replacement. As I drove away, I could see her in the rearview mirror, sitting on the front steps of the house she'd never live in again, crying into her hands. I felt nothing but satisfaction. The Pemberton Pharmaceutical meeting on Monday morning was a massacre disguised as a business presentation. I sat in their conference room overlooking Boston Common, surrounded by executives who'd trusted Morrison and Associates with their most sensitive market data and systematically dismantled everything Bryce Dalton had built. The concerning issue, I explained, clicking to the next slide in my presentation, isn't just that Morrison acquired confidential client information through inappropriate channels. It's that they used that information to manipulate market positions for their other pharmaceutical clients. Dr. Sarah Chen, Pemberton's CEO, leaned forward with the intensity of someone who'd built a billion-dollar company by paying attention to details. You're suggesting they engaged in market manipulation? I'm suggesting that when a firm suddenly demonstrates intimate knowledge of your proprietary research data, your competitive strategies, and your regulatory concerns, there are only two explanations. Either they're remarkably gifted at market analysis, or they had inside information. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a timeline of Morrison's pharmaceutical account acquisitions overlaid with my meetings with Celeste during the same period. This timeline shows Morrison's success rate in acquiring new pharmaceutical clients increased by 400% during a 6-week period earlier this year. During that same period, my wife was having an affair with Bryce Dalton, Morrison's VP of pharmaceutical accounts. The room was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. You're alleging that your wife passed confidential client information to Morrison through her relationship with Mr. Dalton? This, from James Morrison, Pemberton's CFO. I'm not alleging anything. I'm presenting facts and allowing you to draw your own conclusions. I clicked to the final slide. What I can tell you is that Whitmore and Associates has never had a data breach, never had an employee charged with securities violations, and never had to fire someone for mixing personal relationships with professional responsibilities. Dr. Chen closed her folder and looked around the table at her colleagues. Mr. Pierce, assuming Pemberton decides to move our account to Whitmore, what assurances can you give us that our confidential information will remain confidential? The same assurance I gave you for 8 years when you were my client at Hartwell & Associates. My word, backed by a track record of absolute discretion. Even when it comes to your personal life? I met her gaze steadily, especially when it comes to my personal life. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises to have contracts ready by the end of the week. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb. How did it go? I replied, we'll need to hire more staff. By Wednesday, 3 more pharmaceutical companies had moved their accounts to Whitmore. By Friday, Morrison and Associates had laid off half their staff and was rumored to be considering bankruptcy. The SEC investigation had expanded to include wire fraud charges against both Bryce and Celeste. According to Riley's sources, they were both looking at potential prison sentences of 5 to 7 years. That evening, David Kim called with an update on the divorce proceedings. Celeste's attorney wants to meet. They're ready to discuss settlement. What kind of settlement? The kind where she gets nothing and agrees not to contest the divorce. I poured myself a glass of the Macallan 25, the bottle Celeste and I had been saving for a special occasion, and settled into my leather chair overlooking the harbor. What's the catch? No catch. She's facing federal fraud charges. She's unemployed and unemployable, and she has no assets to speak of. Her attorney is trying to minimize her legal exposure, not maximize her settlement. And if she contests it? Then we present evidence of adultery, fraud, and asset dissipation to a judge who will give her even less than nothing. David paused. Graham, she's beaten. Completely. Her attorney knows it, she knows it, and now you know it. I sipped the scotch and watched the sun set over Boston Harbor, painting the water gold and crimson. Schedule the meeting. The settlement conference was held the following Tuesday in David Kim's office. Celeste arrived with her attorney, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Voss, who specialized in white-collar criminal defense. Celeste looked even worse than she had the week before, thinner, paler, wearing a cheap suit that suggested her financial situation had deteriorated significantly. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Let's get straight to the point, Patricia said, opening a thin folder. My client is prepared to waive all claims to marital assets in exchange for Mr. Pierce's agreement not to pursue additional civil remedies related to the loss of his clients. David looked at me, eyebrows raised. That's quite generous. It's quite necessary, Patricia replied, given the circumstances. I studied Celeste across the conference table. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the mahogany surface as if it held the answers to questions she was afraid to ask. What about the house? I asked. She'll sign a quitclaim deed transferring her interest to you. The cars? Yours. Retirement accounts? Yours. Alimony? Patricia's laugh was bitter. My client will be fortunate to avoid prison, Mr. Pierce. She's in no position to request alimony. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. 6 weeks ago, Celeste had sent me a text message calling me an unemployed loser. Now she was sitting across from me, prepared to give up everything we'd built together just to minimize her legal exposure. There's one more thing, I said. David looked at me with concern. Graham, don't overreach. This is already a complete victory. I want a written apology, a full admission of what she did, why she did it, an acknowledgement of the damage it caused. Patricia started to object, but Celeste spoke for the first time since entering the room. "I'll write it." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute defeat. "Celeste, I don't think—" Patricia began. "I'll write it," Celeste repeated, finally looking up at me. Her eyes were hollow, empty of everything except regret. I owe him that much. The apology letter arrived by messenger the next day, written in Celeste's careful handwriting on expensive stationery that she probably couldn't afford anymore. "Graham, I know this letter can't undo the damage I've caused, but I need you to know that I understand what I did to you, to us, and to myself. I betrayed our marriage by having an affair with Bryce Dalton. I betrayed your trust by sharing confidential client information that helped him steal your accounts. I betrayed 23 years of partnership by planning to leave you the moment your career hit a setback. But most of all, I betrayed the man who loved me, supported me, and gave me everything I thought I wanted. I threw away the best thing in my life because I was selfish, shallow, and afraid. I called you an unemployed loser, but the real loser is the woman who had everything and threw it away for nothing. I'm sorry, Graham. I'm sorrier than you'll ever know. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me, not for my sake, but for yours. You deserve to be free of the anger I caused. Celeste." I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer next to the divorce papers David had filed that morning. 3 months later, the divorce was final. Celeste pled guilty to wire fraud and received 18 months in federal prison. Bryce got 3 years and was permanently barred from working in the financial services industry. Morrison and Associates declared bankruptcy 2 weeks after Celeste began serving her sentence. I kept the house, the cars, and the retirement accounts. More importantly, I kept my dignity and my reputation. The pharmaceutical companies that had been stolen from me became my most loyal clients at Whitmore. My commission checks were larger than my old salary had been. 6 months after the divorce was final, I was promoted to senior partner. 1 year later, I married Dr. Sarah Chen from Pemberton Pharmaceutical in a ceremony overlooking Boston Harbor. She was brilliant, successful, and had never once suggested that my worth was tied to my employment status. On our wedding night, as we stood on the balcony of our honeymoon suite, Sarah asked me if I ever regretted how things had ended with Celeste. I thought about the question as I looked out at the harbor, remembering the night I'd sat in my kitchen reading that devastating text message, feeling like my world had ended. "Regret?" I said, pulling Sarah closer. "The only thing I regret is that it took her leaving for me to realize I deserved better." "Better than what?" I smiled, thinking about Celeste sitting in a federal prison cell, probably wondering how her perfect plan had gone so wrong. Better than someone who thought love was conditional on success, who confused partnership with profit, and who believed that loyalty was something you could trade up from when a better offer came along. Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Do you think she learned anything from what happened?" I considered the question seriously. Had Celeste learned anything from losing everything? Had she gained any insight from watching her carefully constructed life collapse? Had she grown as a person through the consequences of her choices? "I think she learned that actions have consequences," I said finally. "Whether that makes her a better person or just a more careful one, I honestly don't care anymore." Sarah nodded and leaned against my shoulder. "Second chances are for people who deserve them." "No," I said, remembering the title I'd given to my story when I'd first started planning my revenge. "Second chances are for winners, and Celeste was never going to be a winner." As we stood there overlooking the harbor where my old life had ended and my new one had begun, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace. The anger was gone. The hurt had healed. The desire for revenge had been satisfied so thoroughly that it no longer existed. Celeste had taught me an important lesson, though not the one she'd intended. She'd taught me that some people view relationships as transactions, love as a commodity, and loyalty as something that expires when circumstances change. But she'd also taught me something else. That a man's worth isn't measured by his job title or his bank account, but by how he responds when everything he thought he knew about his life turns out to be wrong. I'd responded by refusing to be a victim. I'd chosen to be a winner instead. And winners, as I'd learned, don't need second chances. They make their own.